Hi everyone, it's Azal, and in this video I'm going to make the feathers on a bird's back. I am going to start by rolling out a piece of clay into a long thin strip. Now I'm gonna cut out the shape of the feather out of the long strip of clay. I have to make sure that my feathers is nice and thin before I place them on the bird's body. Now I'm gonna smooth the feathers out into the body. Now I'm just going to scrape off some clay from the feathers to make them nice and thin. Now I'm going to use the small scraper just to make the shape of the feathers. Now I'm just going to scrape off more clay to make the feathers nice and thin. I have to make a lot of feathers the same way, but it will take too long for me to show everything. Now I'm just going to smooth out a few more feathers into the back of the bird. I have to make sure that's how I want my feathers to be placed before I smooth them into the back of the bird. Now I'm just going to place the feathers on the back of the bird, smooth them out and scrape a little bit of clay off to make the feathers nice and thin. Now I'm going to make a few small feathers. I have to make them in a different way. I have to roll them up in a small little ball and sort of squeeze it into the shape of the feather. Now I'm just going to scrape off some clay off of the feathers to make sure they're nice and thin before I place them on the back of the bird. Now I'm just going to smooth the feathers out into the back of the bird. I'm just going to make a few more feathers and place them on the back of the bird. I will make a lot more, but it will take me too long to show everything. I had to speed this video up because it will take too long for me to show everything in normal speed. I'm just going to smooth in a few feathers in the back of the bird. Now I'm using the small scraper to shape the feather. Now I'm just going to put a few more feathers on the back of the bird. Going to smooth them out into the bird's back and shape them with the small scraper. I am going to use this clay plastic tool just to give the feathers of the bird a nice round shape and to make them stand out a little bit more. I have to make sure that my feathers are the right shape and that they're not too thick, so they have to be nice and thin before I do anything else with them. I'm just going to make a few more feathers and I'm done with step 1 of making the feathers. My bird's back doesn't look that good right now, but I have to add a few more details to the feathers before it will look natural. I'm just going to scrape more clay off the feathers to make them nice and thin, to make sure that they're ready for step 2, where I add a little bit of detail on the feathers. To make the detail of the feathers, I'm going to use a knife, a needle, and a feather pen or a clay scratcher. I'm just going to gently draw the lines of the feather using the feather pen. Just going to gently scrape them out of the clay until they're ready. I wasn't very happy with the lines that I made with my feather pen, so I just erase it with the scraper, just scrape off all of the clay, and I'll make new lines that will look a lot better. Now I'm just gonna make a few more lines, and I'm gonna use the needle to carve out some of the clay to make the feather look a little bit rough. I'm just gonna use the knife to cut a few pieces out of the feather so that the feather looks nice and rough. A bird's feather isn't that neat and tidy. I have to start with the tail of the bird and work my way up to make sure that I don't lose any of the detail. Now I'm just gonna make a few more feathers the same way. I'm gonna use the feather pen, the knife and the needle to make sure that the feathers look nice and natural. Now I'm just making sure that the feather is the way I want it before I start with the next one. Now I'm just gonna make sure that the lines on the feathers are presented beautifully. I just have to make a few more feathers, then I'm done with half of the tail. I just have to make one more feather, so I'm just gonna gently make the lines of the feather with the feather pen, just gently pressing it into the clay. And then I'm gonna use the knife and just cut out a few pieces of the clay to make sure that my feather looks natural. I am finally done with half of the bird's tail. Now I just have to do the other half. The same thing that I've done with the one half of the tail, I must do with the other half of the tail. I'll use the feather pen to make the lines, and I will use the needle and the knife to cut out some pieces of the clay just to make the feathers look more natural. It is better to work from the end of the tail towards the middle of the tail than to work it the other way around, because when you work from the middle of the tail, the detail just gets lost. I'm just gonna make a few more feathers on the tail. I'm gonna take the feather pen and just scrape some clay off and make those beautiful nice lines on each and every feather. And then I will just take the needle and the knife and just carve out more clay to make the feather look more natural. I just have to make one more feather for the tail of the bird, and then the tail of the bird will finally be done. Now I'm gonna start by making the little feathers a lot better. I'm gonna use my feather pen and make those fine small lines that you see in the feathers. Then I will take the knife and the needle and just cut off some clay just to make the feather look more natural. Now I'm gonna make each and every single feather the same way. I'm just gonna make those nice lines and take my knife and my needle and just scrape some clay off to make the feathers look more natural. When you are making the feathers, before you make the lines and everything else, you must make sure your feathers aren't nice and tight and even, because a bird's feathers isn't that nice and tight and neat. So it must look a little bit rough. Now I'm just doing it with each and every single feather, just drawing in the lines, cutting some clay off. It's very important that the feathers isn't too thick. If it's too thick, you can always scrape off some clay. If the feathers are too thick, they are very difficult to handle, so I like having them nice and thin. I just have to make a few more feathers. Just gonna scrape some clay off and make the lines, those beautiful lines that the feathers have. I'm just gonna make sure that my feathers are rough and not as nice. Like I said, I had to speed this video up because it will take too long for me to show every single feather that I made. So I needed to speed this a little bit up. I'm almost done with the back of the bird, and it's starting to look a lot better and more natural. I'm finally done with the bird's back. It looks really good and natural. I decided not to draw in the lines of the last feathers because I'm gonna place more feathers on top of them when I fix the bird's head. So I'm gonna leave them just the way they are, but the bird's back is finally done, and I must say it looks really natural. Next time I'll make the small feathers on the wings, and I'll see how far I can get with those. Thank you everyone for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe at the end of the video, and I will see you next time.